People who spend a lot of time working in isolation, research stations, etc., what are your creepiest experiences? Story 1. Used to be a traveling manager for a very small chain of gas stations. They're all in very rural areas. I used to dread going to one in the absolute middle of nowhere, mainly because I was by myself and people would come in absolutely wasted. I was too afraid not to sell them alcohol, and the cops were 30 minutes away at the very least. It was about 3:30 a.m., and one of the regular drunks drove his current girlfriend's car to the store while I was on shift. He insisted I go out with him. When I said no, he lost it and started screaming I was a lesbian and, "What does that do for me?" I just shook my head in disbelief. Then he started screaming that he had been molested as a child and I could help him get over that if I would just have intercourse with him. I did my best to calm him down and he left. I locked up, called the cops and the usual manager, and told her I was leaving as soon as the cops showed up. It was a 30-ish minute wait for the cops, and the whole time I thought he kept driving around the store. It was a building built in the 1950s, so every little noise made me jump. I finally called my friend who owned a gun store in the next town over to come and wait with me. I had to call 911 again to tell them I thought the guy was circling the store, my friend on his way wasn't the culprit, and he was armed. The cop showed up about 10 minutes later. It was so frustrating. All they said was if it happens again, to give them a call. I quit that weekend. The regular manager told me that she'd lost other female workers because of the drunks at that location, but this guy took the cake. Holy crap. As a woman who worked the graveyard shift alone at a gas station, I can empathize. Had to deal with a lot of creeps. Luckily for me, the cops were much closer. That came in handy when a guy walked in, wandered around to pick out a snack, fixed himself a fountain drink and paid, all with his dong hanging out of his pants. I'm a bigger bald guy who worked the night shift at a gas station, and even I was scared working alone sometimes when certain folks came in. I can't imagine how scary it would be for you in that situation. Frankly, this makes me understand those gas stations where the cashiers are surrounded by bulletproof glass all the better. Seems annoying to work in, but if you've been through a situation like this, a hell of a lot safer. Story 2. I don't really work in isolation, but most nights by the time I leave work, it's pretty late and there are very few people left around. I usually leave by myself. One night I got into the elevator alone and pressed the button for the ground floor. The elevator stopped at the ground floor, but the doors didn't open. Then it went to the top floor. It just started going back and forth between the top floor and the ground floor without ever stopping to open the doors. I clicked the alarm button in the elevator and got on the line with security. They were sympathetic, but the only solution they could offer was to just keep trying different floors until the elevator stopped. So that's what I did, but I had no luck until I tried the second floor. In my building, the second floor is famous for how creepy it is. The elevator area is the only area that looks finished. The rest appears to be under construction, yet completely abandoned at the same time. The elevator area has dark, blood-red walls and very dim lighting. This is the only lighting on the entire floor. Even when the elevators aren't going completely haywire, they'll stop on the second floor and open the doors every now and then without any explanation. It's been that way for the last 3 years I've worked there at the very least. So, of course, it's only fitting that my runaway elevator would finally stop and let me out on this creepy butt floor. Security told me to just wait there for them to come get me. During that crazy elevator ride, I kept thinking, this is the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. But I was wrong. Those long, agonizing minutes of standing there alone on the second floor, squinting into the dark corners of that evil place were the most terrifying moments of my life. The elevators still inexplicably stop on that floor from time to time. I don't believe in anything supernatural, but if I did, I'd say there's something on that floor that wants to get people. Story 3. Used to be a night janitor in a movie theater. We would go in at 4 and clean until the doors opened at 11. To save time and our jobs, we would sometimes come in around the time the last movies were finishing and just sleep in one of the empty theaters, making sure we would be there when the shift started. Our basic MO was to use electric leaf blowers up and down the aisles of each theater, blowing popcorn and trash all the way to the bottom, then cleaning the seats up manually for anything gross or larger debris. This was expedient, but it was very loud, so it was easy to lose yourself in the work. Of course, the lights were on in the theaters to better assist in the cleaning, and usually we were the only ones there at the time, so whenever something strange happened, we would chalk it up to the other guy. There was one standing rule, though, that we all followed to the letter: no one in the projection booth. There was no reason to go up there, we didn't clean it, all our supplies were downstairs, and most of all, it was haunted. There was a phenomenon that happened with theaters and projection booths. No matter what, you always feel like you're being watched. When you walk around deaf from the sound of the blowers in an empty movie theater, and you happen to glance up at the booth, and there is unmistakably someone standing there watching you, you will crap your pants. Especially when you go out into the hallway and find the other guy in his theater working. Especially when you and he go to either end of the building and the two exits of the booth and trap whoever it was up there, and there is no one there. We just chose not to frick with it. I mean, I feel like this is just something that gets in your head and you start to see things. It's hard not to when everyone believes it and talks about it. But I had a friend who managed our local movie theater at the time, and I would hang out after hours sometimes, and you know what? Yeah, it's friggin' creepy, and you feel like you're being watched, so I get it. Story 4. I was once on a solo assignment to safely prepare computers in an abandoned medical lab to be destroyed/sold, so I had to gather all hard drive storage devices and secure them for shredding. The lab had been closed during business hours with patients there, blood tests running, etc. So there was still blood and centrifuges, needles that didn't make it in the sharps box, etc. I was alone in the building and had been told there was no power, but there was running water. I needed a drink, so I started walking through the dark hallways trying to find a sink. As I neared the bathrooms, one of the toilets flushed. I bolted back to the warehouse room I'd been working in, which had an exit. I was sure there was someone living or squatting inside the building and called my sister, who happened to be our client contact for this project. She laughed pretty hard at first, then said she did the same thing when she first went there. Apparently, one of the toilets runs constantly, and when it fills up too much, it flushes. A bit later, I got another scare when a door slammed, but that was because the power was on and the AC kicked in, sucking the door closed. It didn't help that the place was 3.5 hours away in the middle of a cornfield with nothing else around, and I'd been awake since 3 a.m. to make it up there in time. To get into the building, I also had to step over dead birds that I imagine had flown into the windows. Story 5. Okay, late to the party, but still want to share for my fellow night shifters. This isn't particularly extreme, but still gives me the chills. I used to work as a pharmacy tech overnight at a hospital. My job was to deliver meds to all parts of the hospital to machines that nurses use, like vending machines, but for meds. I hated it. The parts where I was mostly alone were the surgery areas where there was no one really around and the lights were dimmed. I would always wear headphones to keep me sane because of how quiet it was, and every little noise made me jump. One night, I pushed my carton into an empty, dimly lit room as usual. As I went to punch in my password to access the machine, in the reflection of the machine window, I saw a figure of a woman walking in the room. I spun around so fast but saw no one there. I didn't hear footsteps, I paused my music, and I held my breath to make sure I could hear fine. Nothing. I turned back around and tried to fill the machine as quickly as I did and gunned it out of there. I avoided looking into windows or mirrors that whole week. I guess I'm a big scaredy cat, but hospitals at night freak me out. The amount of people that die there just reminds me that it can truly be haunted. Hospitals, when they are devoid of people and it's dark, are friggin' scary, so I get it. Part of it is the smell that is just off because of the medical stuff and cleaning supplies. It feels so unnatural compared to literally almost any other place you might hang out. But also, I really feel like it's the halls. Super long, straight halls in the dark are, for some reason, way creepier than short halls you can't see down. Doesn't make sense at first thought, but I swear it's true. Story 6. I inspected an old abandoned hospital several times and would talk to my security guard escort about his experiences. This place could be the setting of The Walking Dead. It's extremely creepy. There's stuff scattered all over the floor, missing ceiling tiles, and only every fourth light or so is on in the hallways. As we walked the building, we could hear doors slam and other loud noises coming from the other floors. He said he caught crystal heads in there all the time. He told me his creepiest experience was seeing a child running on the 4th floor from the lobby area. He searched the entire building but couldn't find anyone inside, even though there is only one unsealed entrance. This apparently has occurred several times, but he told me he still doesn't believe in ghosts. The guards have to walk this hospital every night armed with only mace. I gladly have never gone back, although I drive my son by it sometimes to freak him out. Parenting at its best. Here's what happens if you don't clean your room, little Johnny. Story 7. A coworker and I were doing some routine maintenance and inspections at an electrical substation. This facility is in the middle of the desert, about 30 miles out of town and 10 miles from the nearest main road. We were the only ones there, so no other vehicles parked outside. We go through 2 locked gates and 2 locked doors to get to the breakers we need to test. When we enter the room, we will be working and we hear frantic whispering above the hum of the equipment. Not a conversation, but a single intelligible voice. The whispers go silent as I step into the room. My coworker and I glance at each other without a word and quietly and cautiously sweep the room. This is an area that gets frequent illegal immigrant traffic, but I had no idea how or why they gained access to this building. We searched every inch of that room but didn't find a trace of human activity aside from our own. We performed our tasks and left, sharing very few words. Once we finished and back in the truck, my buddy confirmed that I had heard the voice as well. We haven't spoken about it since. Story 8. I was an RA in college. My senior year, I was student teaching, so I stayed on campus during the college spring break since the high school was still in. We had some international students who stayed on campus during the break in my area, so I volunteered to sit office hours and do rounds each night. There were 4 dorms in my area, and the one building only had 1 student on the first floor. I did my first round at 8 and went to do my second rounds at 10 p.m. On the 3rd floor of the building, on my second round, someone had gone to every door and colored in the whiteboards posted on every door. Black marker, solid, parallel lines, each board methodically filled in. It would have taken hours, and I know that they weren't colored in when I did rounds at 8. I had heard stories about that building, light switches randomly flicking off, people seeing faces reflected on windows, that sort of stuff. I decided to skip doing rounds on that floor the rest of the week. Either something was going on there, or that is one heck of a weird college prank. However, having seen many a college prank, I am inclined to believe the latter. College students, especially those in the dorms, get up to mischief in the strangest ways. Like, you go into the communal kitchen space and find someone dumped out a box of Lucky Charms and arranged all the marshmallows in rows by type as a prank. Definitely couldn't have anything to do with the stuff college kids might be smoking. Story 9. Worked overnights in a gas station for a summer, and it was my responsibility to restock the fridges. We had a garage as part of the building, as well as a car wash. The stock room was across the shop, and in back of it was the side entrance door to the car wash. It was a quiet night, and I was carrying an ambitious amount of inventory by hand. As soon as I set foot in the shop, I got the chills and the hair on the back of my neck rose. I knew that logically I was safe and that there was nobody there, but it felt like someone was walking on my heels. Another time I was in the cashier's booth with the steel door leading to the shop closed. There was a tiny window on the door, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a young boy walk out of the garage door. The overhead door was obviously closed, and the path he was going definitely led out there. Story 10. My dad worked at the haunted Toys R Us in Sunnyvale, California. He worked as a night watchman back in the day to pay for school. Cool gig. Got to sit around and study while being paid for doing next to nothing. Learned to juggle and play guitar too. Weird stuff happened there all the time. Objects would fall off shelves as you walked past them. Lights flickered on and off from time to time. Noises from the other side of the hall. Stuff like that. So there he was in a big, mostly dark store all by himself thinking about the ghost. He said out loud, "If there's a ghost here, then that balloon, the red one in the middle of the roof, will pop." Right as he finished the sentence, the balloon burst. Suffice to say, he turned on all the lights in the building and got as close to the door as he could for the rest of the shift. Never trust an isolated red balloon. Story 11. I work in a liquor store. I do closing shifts alone for several hours in the shop until 10:30 or so. I'll regularly be in the cooler and hear footsteps in there with me. That's pretty much nightly. Also, one time I was counting down my till well after closing and heard a bottle clank somewhere in the store. I walked over and found a bottle of wine standing upright on the floor in the middle of the aisle. I'd just done my nightly walkthrough to make sure all shelves were in order. I'd also just mopped the floor. The tiles were still wet without a single footprint leading up to or away from the bottle. I logged into the CCTV system and started looking back through the past 30 minutes for that particular aisle. Nothing. At one point, that particular camera just slipped out, and when it came back, the bottle was there. Things like this always make me think it's a coworker pulling a prank, but then, you would think they would lay claim to it later and have a laugh at you. I mean, if you prank somebody, but they don't know they've been pranked, have they really been pranked? I mean, yeah, I guess so, but I want to see the look on their face when I reveal my treachery. but maybe that's just the supervillain in me. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.